Arrogant billionaire dares a cleaner's little boy to a game of chess and gets more than he bargained for. At his dazzling mansion gala, billionaire Richard Calloway strutted through the room, tossing insults like confetti. No one was safe, not even Lydia, the house cleaner he treated as if she were beneath the marble floor she polished. That night, Lydia's 9-year-old son, Malik, wandered into the lounge, drawn by a gleaming chessboard set under golden light. Richard's lips curled into a cruel grin. "What's this? A little monkey thinks he can play?" he sneered. Laughter erupted from the crowd, sharp and merciless, but then Malik's small fingers touched the pieces, calm, steady. He made a move, then another. The laughter dimmed to whispers. By the end of the first match, the billionaire's smirk had thinned. A second game began, tension hanging heavy in the air. Richard's pride, an empire built brick by brick, began to crack before the very people whose respect he fed on. What happened next would leave the room breathless, and the boy he meant to shame standing taller than anyone imagined. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring you stories that move, inspire, and surprise you. Now, let's begin. Richard Calloway was the kind of man whose name could silence a room. He owned skyscrapers, toppled rivals without blinking, and wore intimidation like a designer suit. His fortune wasn't the only thing people feared. It was the arrogance polished into every word he spoke. Staff whispered he treated them worse than furniture. A chair at least might get dusted. Richard's jokes were blades, slicing at heritage, accents, or anyone who dared look poor in his presence. He believed money gave him the right to wound, and people laughed along, too scared to challenge him. That night, his mansion gleamed like a cathedral to excess. Crystal chandeliers rained light onto marble floors, and violins spun delicate music through the air. Waiters glided by with champagne, heads lowered like courtiers before a king. The annual Calloway Gala was his stage, a place to parade not just his wealth, but his power over friends, enemies, and anyone unlucky enough to serve him. In a far, quiet corner, Lydia Brooks, a black woman with tired eyes and quiet grace, scrubbed the edges of the ballroom floor. Her uniform clung after hours of bending and rushing, but she didn't dare slow down. Tonight was harder than most. She'd begged to bring her 9-year-old. Malik, his older brothers, couldn't watch him. And there was no one else. Richard hadn't bothered to answer, but a kind supervisor slipped her a nod. "He can sit in the back. Just keep him out of sight." Malik perched near the service hallway, hugging his worn backpack. His wide eyes drank in the chandeliers, tuxedos, and polished shoes clicking across marble. He smelled lemon polish, cigar smoke, and the sweet perfume of women who floated past like queens. To him, this world was a living storybook. Lydia's gaze flicked back every few seconds, her hands flying across the mop. "Stay there, baby," she mouthed. She knew what happened to staff who strayed into Richard's line of fire, but curiosity tugged at Malik. From somewhere beyond the archway came laughter, deep voices, the clink of glasses, and another sound. Soft yet deliberate, a faint tap, tap, like a drumbeat of thought. The sound of chess pieces meeting a wooden board. Richard Calloway, ever hungry for an audience, was setting the stage for a spectacle no one in that room would forget. By the time the gala reached its peak, Richard swept his entourage into the lounge like a king leading a parade. The air inside was thick with the scent of oak and expensive cigars. Dark leather armchairs formed a circle around a chessboard, gleaming beneath a brass lamp. This was Richard's private theatre, a place where money, charm, and calculation blended into one performance. "Shall we?" he drawled, unfastening his cufflinks with the precision of a surgeon about to make an incision. One by one, his guests took their seats. Men in sharp suits, women whose diamonds threw light against the polished wood. They leaned forward, eager to prove themselves. Yet each challenger left the table with a tight smile, hiding the sting of defeat. Richard didn't just win. He dismantled them piece by piece until their confidence was nothing but dust. "Another checkmate," he said lightly, brushing a captured pawn aside as if it were lint on his sleeve. "And you people run companies? I'm amazed you can balance a checkbook. Laughter burst out, brittle and forced, a sound of people terrified to be the one not laughing. From the shadowed hallway, Malik peeked in, his big eyes locked on the chessboard, tracing every move like a secret map. The pieces weren't just ivory and ebony to him. They were soldiers, dancers, a puzzle calling his name. He edged forward, forgetting his mother's warning. Richard's gaze snapped to him. Like a predator spotting a flicker of movement, the billionaire's smirk widened. Well, well, he said, voice slick as oil. Who let a little monkey sneak in here? The words sliced through the air. Laughter followed, freer this time, feeding off Richard's cruelty. Lydia appeared almost instantly, breathless, her cheeks hot with panic. She grabbed Malik's arm, pulling him back. I told you to stay put, she whispered fiercely, her voice shaking with anger and fear. Her hand landed on his shoulder, not to hurt but to warn him. Richard lifted a hand, stopping her with mock kindness. Easy, Lydia, he said, feigning concern. The boy just wants to see how the big players do it. He leaned back, eyes glittering with amusement. Maybe the little monkey wants to try for himself. The laughter swelled like a cruel tide. Malik froze. His fists tightened at his sides, a storm brewing behind his steady gaze. Lydia's eyes begged him to leave it, to fade into the background. But Richard's invitation hung heavy in the air, daring him. Everyone watched. The billionaire tapped the empty chair opposite him. Come, he commanded, voice smooth and sharp all at once. Let's give the boy a story to take home. Malik hesitated, then slid into the oversized leather chair. He looked small against its towering back, but his eyes stayed fixed on the chessboard. He breathed in deeply, the smoky scent of cigars, the polished wood, the quiet buzz of whispers. His fingers hovered above the table, trembling only slightly. Richard leaned forward, savoring every second. Do you even know how these pieces move? He asked, syrupy with false sympathy. Yes, sir, Malik answered, voice barely above a whisper but steady. Richard chuckled, flicking a glance at the crowd. Well, let's see what kind of prodigy we've imported from the mop bucket. The room erupted again, laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Lydia stood in the doorway, apron clenched in her hands, torn between snatching her son away and letting him face what had already begun. Behind her, two waiters murmured under their breath. Poor kid. Richard's going to crush him. Maybe, the other said quietly, but look at him, he's not blinking. The first game began. Richard moved with brisk assurance, his polished hand gliding over the board as though the pieces were his obedient servants. He tossed quick glances at the crowd, collecting their admiration like tips in a jar. Then he leaned back, a smug smile fixed on his face. Across from him, Malik sat very still. His dark eyes scanned the board, sharp and unblinking, until the hum of conversation around them began to fade. With delicate precision, he lifted a pawn, set it down, and folded his hands in his lap as if he had all the time in the world. Richard's smile wavered as the game unfolded in unexpected turns. Every trap he laid, the boy unraveled. Every reckless strike was parried by calm, deliberate moves. Malik looked less like a child, and more like someone decoding a secret he already knew. Minutes later, Richard leaned forward, frowning at the cornered king on his side of the board. Malik placed his final piece and whispered, "Checkmate." The room gasped as if the air had been sucked out. Richard's cheeks flushed crimson. He gave a loud, brittle laugh. "Beginner's luck," he scoffed, tugging at his sleeve as though the cloth was at fault. The pieces were reset. Richard's hands moved faster now, sharper, his gaze flicking between the boy and the board. But Malik stayed steady. He studied, paused, and then, click, another move landed like a quiet verdict. Bit by bit, Richard's defenses crumbled until his king stood alone again. "Checkmate," Malik said softly, his voice clear and steady. A stunned silence blanketed the lounge before ripples of applause broke through. Some partners leaned in, excitement flashing in their eyes. One man murmured, "The kid's a genius." Richard's jaw tightened. "Best of three," he demanded, his pride fighting to keep its ground, even as a hairline crack began to splinter through it. By the third game, the energy in the room had shifted entirely. The laughter that once swelled at Richard's every barb had faded into a taut hush. Guests leaned forward, their attention tethered to the boy, whose feet dangled inches above the carpet. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his queen. The lamplight caught the gleam of his cufflinks, but the spark in his eyes was gone. Sweat traced a line along his temple. He thrust a piece forward with sudden force, as if speed could erase the creeping dread. Malik remained calm. He touched a rook, hesitated, then slid it into place with quiet assurance. His breathing was slow even, while Richard fidgeted, tapping the table in growing agitation. "You've got to be kidding," someone whispered. "No," came the awed reply. The kids seeing the board clearer than Calloway himself. No one was laughing now. They were rooting, softly, secretly, for the child they'd seen mocked moments earlier. At the doorway, Lydia's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wanted to rush in, to save Malik from whatever storm Richard might unleash. But the calm in her son's eyes held her back. The match tightened to a razor's edge. Richard leaned in, jaw clenched as Malik's knight glided across the board. The room held its breath. "Checkmate," Malik murmured, voice steady, almost serene. Applause exploded like thunder. This time it wasn't nervous. It was real, clapping, cheers, even whistles. Phones appeared, first discreetly, then boldly, capturing the unthinkable. The billionaire's downfall at the hands of a 9-year-old boy. Richard's palm crashed against the chair's arm, his face blazing red. "No," he barked. "Another round. We're not done." But it was over, and everyone in that room knew it. A woman near the front leaned toward Malik, eyes shining. "He's remarkable," she whispered. Another brushed Lydia's sleeve, voice gentle. "Be proud. That boy of yours is 1 in a million." Lydia's hands trembled as she dabbed at the tears streaking her cheeks. For years she had polished these flaws, a ghost in Richard Calloway's kingdom, silenced by his scorn. Yet here was her son, standing in the same room, turning the tide with nothing but a steady gaze and a patient mind. The applause refused to fade. It rose and rolled across the lounge, drowning out Richard's spluttering demands for another round. His voice, once sharp enough to cut through any crowd, now sounded small, stripped of command. He sat stiffly, knuckles white against the chair's arm, as a tide of smirks and knowing glances swept over him. His partners, the same ones who once bowed to his every word, were no longer laughing with him. They were laughing at him. Whispers cut through the clapping, cool and dangerous. "If he can't outthink a child, how can he lead us?" Brilliance blinded by ego, just as we feared. Richard tried to summon a grin, to twist his loss into a joke. But cameras were already raised high, red lights blinking, screens glowing. His defeat was being captured frame by frame, ready to circle the world before dawn. Meanwhile, Malik slid down from the massive chair, his fingertips brushing the smooth edge of the chessboard one last time. He searched for his mother, eyes wide, unsure if he had done something wrong. Lydia was there, shaking, apron clutched in her fists. Pride and disbelief collided inside her. She dropped to her knees and wrapped him in a trembling hug, whispering words swallowed by the roar around them. A silver-haired guest stepped forward, crouching so his eyes met Malik's. "Son," he said, voice warm and steady, "if you'd like, I'll see to it you get the best scholarship money can buy. A mind like yours deserves the world." Malik blinked, shy, and held tighter to Lydia's sleeve. Behind them, Richard sat frozen inside his own downfall. The armor of fear that had shielded his reputation now lay in pieces, shattered by a 9-year-old boy, armed only with quiet brilliance and unshakable calm. By morning, the footage swept across every feed, every headline. They didn't call Richard a titan anymore. They called him what he had become, an arrogant man, humbled by a cleaner's son. What began as a cruel game ended as a lesson, and the boy mocked, as a monkey had checkmated a billionaire into silence. Richard believed wealth made him untouchable. Malik proved that intelligence, courage, and heart could reach higher than any fortune. And if a child can humble a giant, imagine what strength lies hidden in you. Subscribe for more stories where the underdog claims the last move.